Hi, Liila from Merlot. Welcome to Designing a Round Yoke Sweater, Lesson 5B, and we're approaching the end of the sweater. Today we're going to look at how do we add button bands onto the steek area that we have cut open at this point. And we're going to look at where do you place the buttonholes and how to calculate how many stitches the button band will need. Prior doing any of your button band work, I highly recommend purchasing buttons for the sweater prior doing your button bands. It's much easier to determine how many stitches you'll need for each buttonhole when you have the buttons than to try and find buttons you like for the holes that you have done in the button band. Let's get started with how to do the button bands.
The next phase of the sweater is going to be adding a button band onto your sweater. Remember, this will get faced in. We need our button band in this area. We're going to be dealing with that first stitch after the purl stitch. And that's where we're going to be working. First thing I do is I use a crochet hook, and I've got a loop on the end, and I'm just going to pull that loop through that first stitch. When you're doing a button band, you're going to pick up 2 stitches, skip a stitch. So you're doing 2 stitches on your button band for every 3 stitches that are along the body of the sweater. I keep my yarn into the back, but I'm going to pick up, there's 1, so I've got 2 on there now. So then I'm going to skip this one, and then I'm going to come in here and do 1, 2, skip a stitch, 1, 2, skip a stitch, and then what I'm able to do is I can push my crochet hook right to the end, and then you can pop these onto your needle. They will be twisted, so you pick up from the back onto your knitting needle. You're going to go ahead and you're going to go right to the end, and then the next step will be to figure out where the buttons go. I like to have the buttonhole at the bottom and the one that is up here at the neck to be within an inch of the edge. The other buttons get spaced out evenly. This can be done by, you've got 1 in that first inch here, 1 in that first inch there. So out of my 5 buttons, that eliminates 2 of the buttons. I've got 3 left. If you measure the front of that sweater from top to bottom, take off those 2 inches that you used up at the top and the bottom, then divide that distance by the number of remaining buttons plus 1. The reason I'm saying divide it by 4 instead of 3 is because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. By dividing by 4, I can figure out how to evenly space those buttons. I would recommend putting a pin so that when you approach that area when knitting, you'll know when to start your buttonhole. Strictly for demonstration purposes, we're going to say that this strip is your button band. Buttonholes should be right about the center of that button band. Using your row gauge, determine, so if my row gauge was 8, I'm going to be doing my buttonhole on row 4. When doing buttonholes, it doesn't matter what style of buttonholes you're making, whether it's a very plain or whether it's one that's a little bit more intricate. The buttonhole should be 3/4 of the width of the button. That way it's not too tight and not too loose. Use your stitch gauge to determine how many stitches. If your stitch gauge, for example, is 8 stitches per inch and you're using a 1/2 inch button, 3/4 of that would mean you're going to eliminate 3 stitches to make the buttonhole. Go ahead and complete the rest of your buttonholes and then add your next few row of stitches and cast off. Then you're able to cast on the same number of stitches to do the band where you'll sew on the buttons.
So now you have both the buttonhole band and the button band completed on your sweater. Now it's a case of just going through and tidying up and weaving in the loose ends, and your sweater is complete and ready for blocking. I want to thank everyone who has tuned in to all of these lessons, and we do want to hear from you, so just pop us a line through our YouTube or through merlot.ca and let us know how your sweater went. Until next time, this is Leila from Merlot. Happy knitting!